Hi guys, welcome back to Rye Reviews, and I don't normally make super impromptu videos, but I had to drop everything to react to this article because, let's face it, I saw this article shared on Facebook in my Nintendo Switch group, and oh my god, what? Breath of the Wild is the most overrated game of all time. By VGCulture.HQ.com. Yes, I'm not kidding. This is a blog, and it says Breath of the Wild is the most overrated game of all time. Of all time! So Fortnite, Minecraft, Overwatch, none of those games? Breath of the Wild. Okay. And I'm going to be reading this article. It's blasphemous to say. Incorrect use of blasphemous. People use blasphemous unironically in this context. It's not about God. If it's not about God or some spiritual thing, it's not blasphemous. But Breath of the Wild is the most overrated game of all time. Hyphenated. Bad grammar. While it does so many things wonderfully well, it lacks the cohesion that makes an excellent game. Now, we are not saying that it is not a great game. It is. On a review scale, an 8 is great, which is where we would score it if we had reviewed it. But it's not a top 5 game of all time like IGN's top 100 games list suggests. It's not even a top 5 Legend of Zelda game. I disagree about the top 5 Legend of Zelda game. I wouldn't necessarily say it's top 5 games of all time, but yeah. I mean, I haven't played that many games, so I wouldn't know, but okay. If Breath of the Wild weren't a Legend of Zelda game, would it have garnered the same amount of critical acclaim? Yes. There is the litmus test for any game. And the answer here is simply no. Breath of the Wild has a beautiful, expansive world with a lot to do, but it gets old very quickly. The shrines have some interesting puzzles, which can be solved in a multitude of different ways, and the physics engine for the game is masterful. Agree, but they're too grindy. Grindy? What do you mean by that? They're completely optional. Yes, it is your best interest to play through most of the shrines and the dungeons, but if you forgo them completely if you wanted to. Freedom is great, but there's a bit too much freedom. I disagree. The whole game's philosophy is based on having complete optional freedom. And also, not all the shrines are optional, because the first 4 shrines are not optional. Anyway, okay, go back. The game lacks any kind of cohesive structure. I can agree from, like, a story standpoint. By cohesive structure, I mean it doesn't have much progression from point A to point B. There are 4 dungeons, 5 if you count Hyrule Castle, and all of them are lackluster. Puzzles are what makes Zelda what it is, and while it's great the Divine Beast tried something different, they're far too short and limiting. I can, like, kind of agree with that, but I don't think Breath of the Wild is about the dungeons. Like, it's about the world. It's about a survival open world. Like, it's different for Zelda, for sure, but it's not really about the dungeons, and I think, like, having all the shrines probably makes up for the lack of main dungeons. I don't know. I still wish there had been, like, more main dungeons. I wish that would be in Breath of the Wild, too. But I don't want it to be incessantly dungeon heavy. I want it to still be focused on the world. That's what Breath of the Wild is. Okay, next, it said, there's also a lack of diversity in the bosses. Each boss is a variation of Calamity Ganon, which is usually an enriching experience in Zelda. Every boss is unique and is a puzzle within itself regards how to beat them. Okay, I can agree with that. Breath of the Wild, once again, lacks this. Item durability was an experiment that failed miserably and is often the main criticism of the game, along with its lack of story. It's not the fact that Breath of the Wild is a bad Zelda game, it's the fact that it lacks diversity in its design, something that Breath of the Wild 2 hopefully rectifies. Okay. Item durability. Why is that a bad thing? Like, it failed miserably. That's extreme. I don't understand, because the game is based around this, like, survival system. You have to change clothes hot or cold, and the game is based around a survival system. That's how the game is. It's not about, you don't want to get a Master Sword and just be able to hack away at all the enemies. It's a game which teaches you to use different weapons. Yeah, I mean, maybe they could have had a little bit more durability, but letting weapons break works for what Breath of the Wild is. It's realistic. If you have a wooden weapon, it will burn up. That's just how it is. And I know they had things like that before, like the Deku Shields in Ocarina of Time can burn up, and I get that. But the point is that with the large variety of weapons, you wouldn't have room for all of them permanently in your inventory. You get to pick and choose. It's freedom. It's freedom. You get to pick and choose what you get. And you have to manage your inventory, and it's great. It's great. Anyway. It lacks a memorable story. While Ocarina of Time's story was simplistic, it was executed to perfection. It is part what makes it the greatest game of all time, though we maintain that Skyward Sword is the best Zelda game.
Okay, how... Okay, I once heard someone say that Dark Side of the Moon is the best album of all time, but it's not even the best Pink Floyd album. And I guess they're kind of trying to get that. I guess Skyward Sword was their best rated game on their site. And I'm not going to argue with them. That's just their opinion. But how is Ocarina of Time the best game of all time if Skyward Sword is better? That makes no sense. But, okay, Ocarina of Time, I absolutely agree that Ocarina of Time's story is masterful. I've talked about cinema and lighting. I agree with that, absolutely.
The story of Breath of the Wild is told through flashbacks and happens 100 years in the past. There's no emotional connection to the characters except for Zelda. Link is expressionless, which is surprising omission considering it's been a staple of the character since Wind Waker.
I wouldn't call Link expressionless in Breath of the Wild, and also he was more expressionless in Twilight Princess, but okay.
Just because Breath of the Wild is a beautiful open world doesn't mean it can't have a strong narrative as well. The two can go hand in hand. Instead of building an emotionally touching narrative, this is sacrifice for a massive world ripe with exploration. The latter is not a bad thing, but the sacrifice is a part of what makes Breath of the Wild the most overrated game of all time.
That's still ridiculous to me. You can say it's overrated, but it's not the most overrated game of all time. What the heck? What about, like, Fortnite or something?
Breath of the Wild set the foundation for an excellent game, even a masterpiece, but simply was not able to follow through. From a lack of story, steel dungeons, grinding shrines in order to attain the Master Sword, and item durability, the game falters on many fronts. As we said earlier, it is a great game. It simply isn't the masterpiece that the mainstream gaming media makes it out to be. If it were anything other than a Zelda game, it would be criticized heavily on these fronts. It is enjoyable, but not elite.
It's kind of funny that they say if it were anything other than a Zelda game, it would be criticized, because actually my opinion is that it's a great game overall, but not a great Zelda game, so there's that. But okay. Anyway,
now that Breath of the Wild has set a wonderful foundation, though, Breath of the Wild 2 has the chance to build on the success and rectify the game's failures. With the return of Ganondorf, the game should be story-heavy, bring back some traditional items with a twist, of course, and true dungeons, and Breath of the Wild sequel will go down as the greatest game of all time.
Oh, okay, dude, hold your horses. We have no idea. Jeez, even if it had all that, how do you know it'd be the greatest game of all time? Like, okay, if there is a game that out-Ocarina's Ocarina, then yes, it would be the greatest game of all time. But here's the problem. Twilight Princess already tried that, and it didn't work. Not saying Twilight Princess is a bad game, but I'm saying it's not better than Ocarina, okay? And how can you can't have an open-world Ocarina of Time. That's what he's basically proposing here. That won't work. Sorry. Okay. You want to see an open-world Ocarina of Time, and while that would be interesting, I don't know how well that would work.
The problem with Breath of the Wild, though, is that a strong foundation does not make an excellent game. Execution and follow-through do.
So you say it's a great game, but not an excellent game. What's the difference? Great and excellent are synonyms. Okay. This is where Breath of the Wild fails, and why it is the most overrated game of all time. Okay, so that wasn't, like, a terrible article. There were a couple, like, grammatical things, but it honestly wasn't terrible, and it wasn't like someone just bashing it. Like, they actually had some good points, but I kind of wonder, I think calling it the most overrated game of all time is a bit extreme. In the same article where you called Ocarina of Time the greatest game of all time and then said Skyward Sword was better, which makes no sense logically, because how can Skyward Sword be a better Zelda game than Ocarina of Time if Ocarina of Time is the greatest game of all time? That makes no sense. I guess you're talking, like, objectively, and your favorite game is Skyward Sword, which is fine, but, like, even objectively, you could argue that Ocarina of Time isn't the greatest game of all time. Like, I've heard plenty of people say it isn't, so, and yes, objectively, I would say, especially at the time, it was. I don't know, I haven't played enough, like, modern games that people would consider the greatest game of all time to really be able to say if Ocarina of Time is the greatest game of all time, but... And I could do a whole thing on if that game's overrated or whatever. But Breath of the Wild, it does have flaws, absolutely. Out of the 3D Zeldas I've played, and out of what I've played, I would argue Ocarina of Time is the one with the least flaws. It's, even now, it has minor flaws, but I would argue that it's the one with the least number of flaws. Whereas Breath of the Wild has quite a few flaws, but Breath of the Wild was... It's just crazy. It's crazy how right they got Ocarina the first time. Like, that is, like, an insane like, to me, it's just shocking how right they got it on their first go with 3D Zelda. I mean, I guess they already had the formula straightened out from Link to the Past, but it's just like, how did they get it so right? Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. And, of course, there's that. So, but I would say all the other Zelda games have larger flaws to them. Not that that's a bad thing, all the other 3D Zelda slates. But I'm just saying, I'm not expecting games to be perfect. Zelda games are really good. And even if you're saying, yeah, I rated it an 8 out of 10, that's really good. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm just saying, like, I've seen sites give games like Breath of the Wild 10 out of 10, and I'm like, I don't think that's fair because there is no such thing as a perfect game. I think IGN gave Mario Galaxy 2 a 10 out of 10, which, yeah, it's a great game, but, like, really? Okay, but like, I don't know. It's just, to me, this is just my personal opinion. But I was just saying how amazing it is that Ocarina of Time got it so right on the first time, and the fact that it still could be considered objectively the best game of all time. And let's not even, and I'm just saying, like, another game that, like, to me, I think could easily be considered the best game of all time is Super Metroid. And again, that game is, like, held up. That game has aged. Like, I haven't beat it, honestly. I really want to. I just always got stuck. But Super Metroid has aged like fine wine. It is a phenomenal game. Super Metroid, it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's aged like fine wine. And I would argue that some of the SNES games have aged better than some of the N64 games, at least graphically. And, yeah, and Super Metroid is one of those games which you never need to remake it. They got it so right the first time. Like, yeah, they remade Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, but, like, they didn't really change a lot. I mean, it was mostly just the same. They just changed, like, the controls and the updated graphics and frame rate, which is cool. But it's just kind of like, you could never remake Super Metroid, and we'd be totally okay. Like, you never need to remake that game. Like, there are some games which I think are good and absolutely need to be remade, have the potential to be great games, but need to be remade. Super Mario Sunshine. But, anyway, this person at the end was hoping that Breath of the Wild 2 is story-heavy, which, just because Ganondorf makes an appearance doesn't mean it's story-heavy, but okay. Twilight Princess, which is a story-heavy game, has Ganondorf in it, but he's kind of an afterthought, to be honest. And I'm not saying anything bad about that game's story. I'm not saying Twilight Princess has a bad story or whatever. But I'm just saying. And that's all I can say. It's just whatever. Like, honestly, Breath of the Wild, you can say it's overrated if you want, but calling it the most overrated game of all time is a bit of an exaggeration when we live in a world where Fortnite exists and, Minecraft, like, and I'm not saying Minecraft is a bad game, but I'm just saying it's probably more overrated than Breath of the Wild. But that's just my opinion. So, anyway, I'm just gonna go now. Hopefully you guys like the video and you aren't mad at me for yelling about Breath of the Wild, but if you want to send me any more dumb articles about Zelda, then I will read them. So, thank you.